A Chinese state-owned enterprise invested $1.3 billion to secure majority control of Peru's Chancay port, locking in 3 decades of exclusive operating rights. Construction was nearing 85% completion when Peru's government abruptly canceled the deal, citing national security concerns and supposed administrative errors. For many observers, it looked like China had just suffered its first major infrastructure setback in South America. But 6 months later, Peru's president personally flew to Beijing, lobbying to reinstate the agreement. The government went as far as rewriting national port legislation. Within weeks, Chinese operators regained full control of the project. Now, Peru is pledging $21 billion toward 2 major railway systems that will feed directly into Chancay. So what triggered this stunning reversal? And why are neighboring countries suddenly racing to connect their trade routes to a port they once viewed with suspicion? The Chancay project was born out of China's Belt and Road Initiative in 2019, envisioned as a new logistics gateway linking South America to Asia. COSCO Shipping, one of the world's largest maritime conglomerates, financed the full investment in exchange for 60% ownership and exclusive management rights through 2049. Construction began in 2021, with completion targeted for late 2025 and partial operations expected to start soon after, scaling to full capacity within 2 years. Chancay represents China's first directly operated port facility in South America. Its location, about 58 kilometers north of Lima, offers a natural deep-water advantage, with depths reaching 18 meters, deep enough for the world's largest container ships. The design includes 4 berths capable of handling ultra-large container vessels, each holding up to 18,000 20-foot equivalent units. Initial throughput projections estimate 1 million TEUs annually, with long-term plans pushing toward 1.5 million to meet rising Asia-Pacific demand. Currently, shipments between Peru and Asia follow 2 routes: through the Panama Canal or around the Strait of Magellan at South America's southern tip. Once Chancay becomes fully operational, those routes will be reshaped dramatically. The new port will cut transit time from 35 days down to around 25 days, a 29% reduction. That means, faster delivery cycles, lower inventory costs, and more efficient trade flow for exporters. The Panama Canal, though geographically convenient, limits vessel size to under 76,000 tons, blocking the new generation of megaships that dominate global trade. Transit fees also make every voyage more expensive. Ships too large for the canal must take the longer, costlier southern route. Chancay eliminates these bottlenecks entirely, providing unrestricted access to massive container vessels and direct Pacific routes to Shanghai, Shenzhen, and other key Asian ports. But behind Peru's sudden decision to halt the project, many saw another factor: external diplomatic pressure. Washington had been watching Chancay's development with growing concern. The U.S. Department of Defense questioned whether the port could one day serve military purposes, despite it being strictly commercial. Analysts warned that China might use port access as leverage, pressuring South American nations for political favors. These claims echoed a familiar narrative, one that paints Chinese investment as a strategic threat rather than an opportunity for economic growth. The U.S. has long viewed South America as part of its traditional sphere of influence, a region where Washington has historically maintained economic and political dominance. China's growing commercial footprint directly challenges that order. Chancay, in particular, threatens to reroute trade flows away from U.S.-aligned systems and toward Beijing-centered supply chains. Peru's abrupt legal challenge to the port deal bore all the marks of quiet diplomatic pressure. The National Port Authority moved to terminate the agreement, yet still encouraged COSCO to keep funding construction. It was a contradictory stance that left Lima caught between U.S. security demands and Chinese economic influence. The result pleased neither side and risked leaving Peru with an unfinished billion-dollar port and no operational income in sight. The reversal came once Peru calculated what it stood to lose. China has been Peru's largest trading partner for 8 consecutive years. Between January and September 2024 alone, trade between the two nations reached $31.3 billion, up more than 15% year-on-year. Chinese demand fuels Peru's mining exports, especially copper, which accounts for over a quarter of total export revenue. Agricultural goods like blueberries, grapes, and fish meal are also shipped in growing quantities to Chinese markets. This trade relationship supports hundreds of thousands of jobs and contributes billions to government revenues. Economic studies revealed that Chancay's first operational phase alone would generate around $4.5 billion in annual revenue and create more than 8,000 direct jobs in port management, logistics, and support services. Indirectly, tens of thousands more would benefit across transport, warehousing, customs, and regional trade. The port's economic influence would ripple across Peru's coastal economy, particularly Lima and neighboring provinces. Losing control meant sacrificing that multiplier effect. So in June 2024, Peru's president led a high-level delegation to Beijing to reopen talks. The message was clear. Peru wanted to restore the deal. China, in turn, demanded legal guarantees that the agreement would not face future political interference. Lima responded by amending national port laws, ensuring long-term protection for port concessions. The lawsuit challenging COSCO's exclusive rights was dropped, and Chinese operators regained full authority over Chancay's development. During the same trip, Peru's transport minister unveiled plans for 2 massive railway projects worth over $21 billion. These weren't isolated ventures, but part of an integrated system designed to maximize Chancay's economic reach. The first line will stretch about 300 kilometers, linking Lima with Ica, a major agricultural and industrial hub to the south. The second will run roughly 245 kilometers north to Barranca, another key coastal city. Together they will unite Peru's 3 main Pacific ports, Callao, Chancay, and Barranca, into one powerful logistics corridor. The network is designed with future expansion in mind. Northward links could eventually connect to Ecuador, Colombia, and even Panama, while southern extensions could integrate into Chile's rail system, forming a continuous Pacific rail line along much of western South America. At its heart, Chancay would serve as the primary deep-water hub for intercontinental trade. The implications weren't lost on regional powers. Brazil, South America's largest economy, immediately recognized what this meant for the balance of trade and for China's growing foothold across the continent. Brazilian officials have started discussions on linking the country's interior with Peru's Pacific infrastructure. The initiative, called the Two Oceans Railway or South American Continental Bridge, would establish a transcontinental corridor connecting Brazil's Atlantic coast with Peru's Pacific ports. The proposed route would begin at Chancay, cross the Andes, a major engineering hurdle, pass through the Amazon basin along the border, and integrate with Brazil's existing rail networks before reaching Atlantic ports. Currently, Brazil's western and central regions face inefficient export routes due to geography. The Andes act as a natural barrier, historically directing trade toward the Atlantic. From there, goods bound for Asia must either travel north through the Caribbean and the Panama Canal, go around South America's southern tip via the Strait of Magellan, or cross the Atlantic and navigate through the Suez Canal and Indian Ocean. Each path adds thousands of nautical miles and several days to transit time. A transcontinental railway would drastically change this scenario. Products from Brazil's interior, especially soybeans, corn, beef, and minerals, could move by rail directly to Chancay for Pacific shipment. Transit times to Asian markets would drop from 30 to 46 days to roughly 23 to 30 days, depending on the destination. Transport costs would fall proportionally. At 5,000 kilometers, this railway would become South America's first true land bridge between oceans, comparable in strategic importance to the transcontinental railways that unified North America in the 19th century. Landlocked countries like Bolivia and Paraguay face even tougher logistics than Brazil. Their exports must currently pass through Chilean Pacific ports, Brazilian Atlantic ports, or Argentinian facilities along the Rio de la Plata. All options involve long overland journeys followed by extended ocean transport. Connecting to the two oceans railway would give them direct Pacific access through Peru. Even Argentina and Uruguay, with Atlantic coastlines, would benefit from new western export routes that lessen reliance on traditional northern or southern maritime passages. Brazil has already completed technical feasibility studies for the Two Oceans Railway. The project appears in the government's 2025 budget, signaling strong political commitment. The engineering challenges are immense. The Andes represent one of the world's most difficult environments for railway construction, with extreme elevation changes, seismic risks, and remote terrain. Crossing the Amazon raises environmental concerns, involves indigenous territories, and demands construction through dense rainforest with limited infrastructure. Financial requirements are enormous. The Peru-Brazil Railway alone could cost over $30 billion, depending on route and technical specifications. Adding Peruvian coastal rail links and necessary port expansions across multiple countries could push the total beyond $50 billion. Funding at this scale would require massive public investment, private partnerships, or most likely, Chinese development financing through institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and China Development Bank. For South American nations, the potential economic benefits justify the cost. Reducing shipping times to Asia by up to 2 weeks means perishable goods reach markets fresher. Commodity prices improve with faster delivery, and regional manufacturers become more globally competitive. Infrastructure investment generates hundreds of thousands of construction jobs, followed by permanent employment in railway operations, logistics, and expanded trade. Regional integration strengthens South American leverage in global trade negotiations. For the United States, this infrastructure is a strategic challenge. Since its opening in 1914, the Panama Canal has anchored U.S. influence in Latin America. American military and commercial interests treat the canal as a key national asset, despite Panamanian sovereignty. Chance and the Two Oceans Railway provide an alternative route that bypasses Panama entirely. As more South American cargo moves through Peru instead of the canal, Panama's traffic and revenue decline. More importantly, U.S. influence over regional trade flows diminishes. Washington has few options. It could offer competing infrastructure financing, but matching China's willingness to fund tens of billions in South American projects would require congressional approval, unlikely in today's political climate. U.S. officials could pressure regional governments to reject Chinese funding, but Peru's experience shows the economic costs of such alignment. Countries that refuse Chinese investment lose tangible development benefits in exchange for uncertain American goodwill. The pattern extends beyond Peru and Chance. China is now the primary trading partner for most South American countries. Brazilian exports to China surpass those to the U.S. by significant margins. Chilean copper, Argentine soybeans, and Venezuelan oil flow mostly to Chinese markets, giving Beijing substantial influence over regional economic policy. Infrastructure projects like Chance turn temporary trade advantages into permanent logistical dependencies. Once South American supply chains rely on Chinese-operated facilities, reversing that integration becomes economically difficult. Previous infrastructure generations in South America were often shaped by U.S. interests and funding. The current wave of ports, railways, and highways increasingly reflects Chinese strategic priorities. This does not mean South American countries are abandoning U.S. relations, but they are diversifying partnerships and prioritizing whichever external power offers the best development terms. China's willingness to fund large-scale infrastructure without demanding political reforms or human rights conditions makes it especially attractive compared to Western institutions. Whether the South American Continental Bridge will be completed remains uncertain. Technical challenges are formidable. Political obstacles may arise as governments change. Environmental opposition in the Amazon could delay or reroute construction. Financing may falter if Chinese economic growth slows or if regional debt limits borrowing capacity. The U.S. and allies could pressure governments to avoid Chinese partnerships. However, the economic rationale is strong. South American nations want faster, cheaper access to Asian markets, and China wants reliable supply chains for raw materials and agricultural products. The infrastructure connecting these interests delivers mutual benefits that are difficult to achieve otherwise. Unless rival powers offer clearly better financing and strategic value, momentum toward the Peru-Brazil rail connection and Chance's role as a Pacific hub will likely continue. Peru's reversal on Chance's operating rights demonstrates that economic reality can outweigh geopolitical pressure when stakes are high. Lima prioritized access to Chinese investment and trade over American security concerns, and other South American governments are making similar calculations as they evaluate infrastructure partnerships. The decisions made now will shape whether South America's 21st century development follows a U.S.-aligned path, a China-aligned path, or a hybrid approach balancing competing powers while prioritizing regional development goals. Chance Port began operations in early November 2024, marking China's first fully operational deepwater facility in South America. Within weeks, ultra-large container ships docked, loading Peruvian copper and agricultural exports bound for Shanghai. Peru's $21 billion railway investment moves forward with Chinese technical support. Brazil's Two Oceans Railway is in the planning stages, with completion expected within the next decade. The infrastructure that will shape global trade for the next century is being built now. Decisions made in Lima, Brasilia, and Beijing will determine which powers dominate South American connectivity and commerce for generations to come.